Hello everyone. In this tutorial we'll be building a full stack app using AWS Amplify. What is AWS Amplify? Well, it's an AWS service that lets you build full stack apps not just for the web but also for the mobile, and you can easily build different features such as the data layer, authentication and storage using a UI builder tool or a CLI tool. AWS Amplify also recently allows you to build a UI components using Figma that can be easily integrated to the UI. And finally, AWS Amplify allows you to easily deploy and host your apps on AWS. Behind the scenes, it sort of leverages a lot of AWS services such as DynamoDB, AppSync, and Cognito for authentication, and other AWS services that you wouldn't need to interact with yourself. For this tutorial, we'll be building a simple question and answer multi-page app similar to StackOverflow version 0. Over here you can create some questions and you can also view them and answer them. Before we start though, we will need an AWS account, and if you don't have an AWS account you can easily create one, and if you want you can watch a video I created before that you can use as a guide. Then after you log in to your AWS account, you'll be in this console and you can easily search for AWS Amplify, which will open the same view here. So let's get started, and we're gonna be building an app so we can start building the backend. I'll give it a name and I'm gonna confirm deployment. This will take a few minutes, so while this happens, let's go through what we're going to do in this tutorial. There's 4 sections. The first section, which we're going to start now, is creating the backend using Amplify Studio. Amplify Studio is sort of a tool that lets you create this backend using the UI console instead of using the CLI. Then we're going to create the UI elements we need in Amplify Studio and Figma, and we're going to configure them together. And then we're going to create a React app and configure it with the Amplify backend. And after that, the last thing is going to push to GitHub and deploy the app using Amplify hosting. So now the app is still being created, and I'm going to wait for a few minutes and then we can continue. Alright, now the app is done initializing. We can start by launching the studio here. This will open in a new tab, and we're going to get this view that has the different configurations we need to configure a backend. So let's start by adding a data model for our question and answers. And we can add a model for questions. So the question can have an author and also the question text. We can also add another model for the answer, and this one can have an author as well and also an answer text. We have a relationship here that an answer can belong to a question, or a question can have many answers, so we can add this easily here by adding a relationship, and we're going to say one question to many answer. We also we can configure this as required. This will be automatically required, and also the text is required. Author can be optional as anonymous. And this is it for the data model. So we're gonna save and deploy so that this takes effect and we can go to the UI. This will also take a few minutes, so we're gonna wait for this. Awesome. Now this is done. We don't have to pull this at the moment because we're gonna create the UI library, which is our second section of the tutorial, and then we're gonna pull everything together. So we can ignore this for now, but if you want to do it, you can do it, and you can also see more documentation on how to do the testing locally if you want. So I'm gonna create some mock data so that we can view it in our UI library. So let me add a few questions and answers. Okay, now that I've created some data, we can go to the UI library and start viewing these components. Or actually start creating the components. So we can see that we already have different stuff here in the UI library, and we have a UI theme that we can configure and some primitives. We can see that it's already created some forms for us, question create form and question update form. We're going to just use the question create form. I don't see a form for the answer, so we can also create that in a minute. And we needed the components, and the way we can do this is using Figma. So the nice thing about this is that we can sync with Figma and use our design. If you don't have a design, we can start with a template. So let me open the template first. And what you can do is you can get a copy of this template to your Figma account. Once this opens, you can go to My Components here. And these are the already made components for you that you can use. You can already see what we have here. We have some action cards, product cards, and different heroes and other layout stuff that we can use. If you want to customize one of these existing ones, you can copy it and you can paste here. Then over here on the standard or this card that we copied now, so for example, let's rename it without image or without price. Let's take out the price. And I need to first also detach instance so that it's not connected to this one. And because I want to delete the price, so there's the 99 USD. Let me zoom in so you can see better. I'll delete this. And yeah, this sound looks okay. So what I'm gonna do is click on the whole card that we just copied, and I'm gonna create a new component like this. So now this is a ready-made component. Of course, you can configure other stuff in terms of breakpoints, and actually they already have for you as well a Figma plugin, which you can come from here, and you go to plugins and you go AWS Amplify theme editor. If you don't have it, and I already have it here. If it doesn't show up here, you can also go back to your Figma and then you get the Figma plugin from here. So if I run this, I can configure my primary colors. If for example I want this primary colors, you can also configure the font sizes, component, breakpoints, and other interesting stuff. So let me update this with the primary color. And you can see that the primary button colors have been changed. For the question and answer, we don't need all of these components, so you can actually delete all of these that you don't need them and only import the ones that you need. So you can customize these components as you want. I have already customized some of my own components here in a different Figma file, and I've created a navbar that has a new question link and a question card here that I'm going to use for the list, and an individual single card for questions, and the answer card view. And I'm also going to use this as my hero layout for the landing page. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this link, and I'm going to go back to the AWS Studio, and I'm going to sync with Figma and paste this link here. Click on continue. So it's going to want to authorize with my Figma account here, and I'm going to say allow. So I'm going to accept all the changes for the theme that we've configured through the plugin. And now we're going to go through the components that I've added. You can accept individual ones, or you're going to accept all of them. So let's accept all of them in one go. So you can see that the components have been moved here, and we have answer card view. I also have the navbar and question card and question card single. So let's start configuring these. So we can start with the question card and the question card single. Let's do one of these. So for this one, the question card, we can click on configure, and I'm going to set the text label since this is question, so it belongs to the question, and this will be the question text. Sometimes this UI actually sort of hangs in for a few seconds, but you can immediately jump to finish labeling the stuff while it does that, because it's trying to get the data from your content that you created before. So this will be the author name, and this will be the created at that already exists by default. The read more was the button, so this text button. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set on click action, and I'm gonna say you go to a URL, and because we're gonna configure React Router DOM later, so the URL is gonna be question, and then I need to type it again like this. And then I'm going to concatenate the question ID. So it looks like this. So let me click on shuffle preview data to see how it looks like. Okay, this looks like too many text. Okay, we probably should have made this more responsive in Figma, but it's not. But anyways, this is the author and this is the date, and this button will now go to /question and to question ID. All right, let's configure. Before we go to the others, I'm going to create a collection because I'm going to display this as a list in the main page. So I can create a collection, and we can call it question card collection. And you can choose whether you want it to list or a grid like this. I'll choose a list since these are questions. It might make more sense that they go under each other. And you can also add search on the top and pagination. So let's put pagination here at 20 questions, and this should be it. It auto saves, so if you see this red green tick, and let's go back to the UI library to configure the rest. So I'm going to do the same exactly for question card single because it's the same, almost the same component, but doesn't have the button. So this one stands for the question text. And this one stands for question author, and this one stands for question created at, or you can use updated at up to you. This is a single view, so we don't need to create a collection. I'm happy with that. Answer card view. We also need to configure this. So this one will be to the answer text. Shuffle so that I can see it. Okay. Author name. This will be also answer author. Created at. Answer created at. Okay, this looks fine. The last thing I want to do is create a collection for the answers, because we're also going to have a lot of answers per each question. So we can create a collection like this, and we can also add search and pagination if you want to. I'm going to add a sort condition here. So let's put created at to be descending. So latest answers will always come on top. All right, this looks fine. Now I'm going to configure hero layout. So this will be just normal text. It's not connected to any model. So I'm just going to write my Q&A app. For the image, I have this image that I got from Splash, Unsplash, which we can use. This looks fine. And the primary button, we can first give it a label and ask question, and we can give it an on click that goes to another URL, which will be, for example, new question. And we're going to configure this with React Router DOM later. This looks fine. I'm going to use this layout, I think. There's nothing else to configure here, so I'm going to go back to the layout. All right, let's see. We have answer card view. We've configured this. Hero layout. We did configure this. The navbar. All right, let me configure the routes in the navbar. So new question. This should go to URL similar to ask question, which we said was new question. And this one should go back to the home page. It should be like this. Okay, I'm not going to use this layout. I used this one, so I don't need this. I can delete it. And configured this, and I configured this answer card view and question card view. Ignore this for now. Looks ugly. But what I do need is I need to configure a new form for creating an answer. So we're going to create answer form. And for some reason it doesn't show all the data models, but we can use a blank form. And then what I'm going to do is select the data model here, say answer, and say link to data model, and it would automatically create it for us. I want the text to be text area, and maybe it makes sense to put the author below the text. This looks nice. So this is automatically connected to the field text, and this is also automatic to the field author. You can even add a placeholder text. So for example, okay, so this looks nice, and I think we're done with the question, create, and answer form, and we have all the components. So let's start configuring our app. So first thing, we were gonna create a new React app, and I'm gonna call this question answer, Amplify question answer, and this will take a few seconds. Okay, so now I'm going to open the app in VS Code. So let me start the app. We just see what we have. I'm going to clean some of the stuff, and then we're going to configure first Amplify to it. So now I've cleaned some of the stuff. What we're going to need is to install some dependencies. We're going to need to install AWS Amplify, and also AWS Amplify UI React, and we're also going to need to install React Router DOM. All right, now this is done perfectly. We can actually pull our Amplify, and I'm going to show you what we have. So we can go back to AWS Amplify, and you can click here on local setup instructions. Now before you pull, you might not have the Amplify CLI, so you can view the Amplify CLI instructions here. Now this is because I have a Mac. If you don't have a Mac and it doesn't show up correctly, you can Google Amplify CLI, and we can see how to install it. You can use the npm package, or you can use the curl method as well. I already have it installed. I installed it using this, but so I'm just gonna copy this command. This will open a new tab that will just ask me, do you want to log in? And I'm going to click on yes. So I can close this tab now and go back to my terminal. It will ask me a few questions. I can choose Visual Studio Code, and I'm coding in JavaScript, and I'm doing React. The source directory path is the same, src, and this is a React app, so it will build it in a folder called build. And the build command is the same, start command is also the same. Right now it's generating the UI components and pulling in the models. Do I plan to modify this backend? Not for this tutorial, but for you, maybe you want to do it, so you can pull it again. So you can click on yes. Now it's done. We can see that this command has pulled a few stuff for us, including the model and all the UI components that we just created in Figma. So for example, the hero layout that we have and configured with the picture that I provided as well. So let's actually run this app and see how to configure it. Inside an index.js, we can import a few stuff first from the libraries we installed. So import Amplify from AWS Amplify, and we can import AWS config from this file. AWS exports. This file is created also when you created Amplify in this folder, so you can see it here, AWS exports, and it has the connection to your API key to your backend. We can also import the UI styles library. We can also import the UI styles library like this. And finally, last thing is we want to tell Amplify to be configured using this AWS config. So let's run this app, and then we can see what we have here. I made a mistake here. I should have used AWS Amplify, and it should be correct. So right now it's running. There's no errors, which is a good thing. Let's go to app.js and import one of the components we created. And I'm going to import the hero layout one from the UI components, which was here. And I'm just gonna call it here. And once it opens, you can see that it looks nice. It doesn't extend to the end of the page, so let's give it a width of 100%. And you can see now it opens fine. So ask question goes to the correct URL. We don't have the React Router DOM configured yet. Well, we're going to do it in a minute. As you can see, the font doesn't look exactly like what we wanted, so I'm going to go to import and index the font from Amplify UI. And if you want to wonder how I came across that, inside the Amplify UI, you can go and view docs here, and this will open the UI library docs. And inside here, then you can open the components and theming and getting started. So it was somewhere here around installation, if I remember, fonts. And we can import this font here. All right, the font is fixed. Let's configure React Router. Actually, before we configure React Router, if we have a questions, I think I want to see the questions list here. And we already configured a question card collection. So let's just call question card collection. And you can see automatically that we have the questions that we've already added. What is the answer to life, and what is how to center div. And if I click on one, I can see the URL changing correctly, which is the question /ID. That's fine. Let's configure now. Let's configure the React Router DOM. So I'll configure React Router DOM in index.js. For this one, I need to import create browser router and router provider from React Router DOM. Next thing, I want to also create the router. Which takes an array of an objects. Each one has path, and element. So for the home path, we're going to go to app. Let me open this bigger so we can just quickly see what's happening here. For the next path, new question. Was it new question or create question? New question, yeah. New question. The element is gonna be the create question form, which we created in the Figma Amplify UI. So I think it was called question create form. Yeah, this one. Question create form. And it's automatically imported. And the last thing is viewing a question. So this will be question, then a dynamic URL for the ID, and this one will be element question page, which we don't have yet. So let me create this quickly. Inside the question, we want the question ID from the param from the URL, so we can use params from React Router DOM. And inside here, I can easily just go const ID equal use params. So let's see if we get the ID. In the view. All right. So we've configured the router, and if it's /mt to app, a new question, forgot the slash here, to question create form, which it came from Amplify UI, and /question ID to question page. The last thing is I just need to provide it as the instead of app. We're going to use our router provider, and I'm going to say this router is router, the object that I just created. I also forgot to add a couple of things because we implemented a theme with the UI. So there's also a theme provider. from AWS Amplify UI React, and over here we can just wrap the theme provider on our router, and in the theme provider the theme is equal to studio theme, and this is also another file that came from the UI components from Amplify. It's automatically imported as well. Last thing I forgot to add was we also created a navbar, so let's import it. So navbar, which is here. Navbar with a small b, my mistake. And it's complaining an error, question page is not defined. Let me import it as well, and we should be done with this page. This was default. All right, I don't see any errors in my terminal. Let's see the UI and be surprised. Perfect. I can already see the navbar. If I ask a question, I automatically go to a form which I can fill. If I go back to the main page, I see the same thing. Let me open a question. Yes, question, and then question ID. So last thing we need to configure is viewing the question, single question with the answers inside it. And we're gonna do this in the question page, which we just created. So let's work on this page. Before that, let me just do one test and ask a new question. And what is AWS Amplify? Submit. So at the moment I didn't configure on submit that we should go to the main page, but I can click on this and I see what is AWS Amplify, and I can see that the question is here. So let's see. I think I answered one of these questions that has an answer. Let's work on this page and try and view the question here. So we have the ID, which is great, but we need to view the question. And if I put question card that we created, actually, what was it called again? Question card single. It's fine, but it wouldn't know what is the question that we want to view. So to fix this, we need to give it a question, because this is not a whole collection. And the easiest thing to do is ask the data store, hey, can you give me the question with this ID? So let's create a state for this. That starts with null, and maybe I need to import. And I'm going to use effect as well. So inside use effect, we're going to run it every time ID changes. So in here, we're going to go create a function. An async function that says query question. So how do we query a question? Using the ID. First, let's check if ID is not null. If ID, then query question and pass it the ID. Okay, so how do we query a question? And the way we can do this is if we go back to the docs, So we can go to docs.amplify.aws, and inside here with the libraries and it's something called data store, we can see something called manipulating data. And here we have on the index, we have querying for a single item, and it tells us how to do this. So we can go await data store.query, and then we put our model, and then we pass in the ID. So let's do this. So question from backend, for example, will be await data store. So this is imported from the library we have, AWS Amplify .query, and the model is question, which I also imported from models, and the ID. Let me make this bigger. So if we get the question from backend, then we just simply set question from backend. Let's display it. If there were, I'm not going to implement a loading state here, but let's just quickly check. If there's no question, we'll just return loading. Otherwise, I'm going to say question cart single. And how do I know what do I need to pass it? If I click on it, it opens the component props, and I can see that I can pass it a question here. So question is the question from the state. All right, let's go back and see how it looks like. And I can see what is the answer to life automatically rendered here. That's great, but I want to see now the answers that I've given it. So how do I add answers? Well, you can do the same. Technically, we can do answer because we actually create a collection like this. But this is now giving me all the answers for all the questions, and I actually want to give it only give me the question answers for this question, not for all the questions, because this doesn't sound right. So we can do the same. Actually, we can give it a list of answers to display, but before that we need to query the answers that belong to this question. Let's do the same here. So let's create answer list state, set answer list, and this will be use state as an empty array. And I can do another use effect just for the answers. This use effect changes every time the question changes. Now I don't care about the ID. And if there is a question, let's query answers, and I'll pass it the question.id. Query answers. So now answers from backend. So we're gonna data store.query now answer, but this is not the ID of the answer, this is the ID of the question. So we can do something like this. We can pass it a function. This also is also in the data model, like here. And if you query, and we can pass it a predicate, call it predicates that are filters used to match items in the data store. We're going to do something like this. We're going to use equal and use ID. So let's go back here, and we're going to say this is a function that is c.question id. y.id is, if you go to the answer model, let me quickly go to the model, didn't import yet, answer model, and you can see that we have ID author text question ID, so it's with actually a capital ID. Let me fix that. Where was it? Yeah, capital ID, and I go equal the ID of the question. So this is correct, and then we go set answer list answers from backend. So now we have answer list, and now I can immediately say items. So how do I pass it an item? It's the props accepts an item. So I'm gonna say items answer list. All right, let's go back to this and see, and I get 42. What is the answer to life? The styling looks off a bit. It's not centered. So let me quickly fix this. Let me give this class name of app, and in app.css, I'm just gonna reuse the same thing. Just gonna make things centered. Yeah, it looks slightly better. So this is perfect, but at the moment I cannot add an answer, and I want to create an answer so that I can answer this question if there was a new question. So we already have an answer form, but how do we answer the question? So let's add a button that says answer question. I can see the button here, and this button on click can show answer form. This is a function that doesn't exist. Let's create it. Actually, we don't even need to create a function. We can just do a state. Show answer form, set show answer form, and this will be false. So this on click can be a function that says set show answer form to true. And inside here below, if show answer form exists, we can show answer create. Okay, it's not finding it. Let's find it. What was it called? We have question create form, create answer form. Okay, it was confusing naming that I was not consistent. That was my fault. Create answer form. So if I click, I can see it. There is a small issue though, that if I answer here, it doesn't know which question ID that it should belong to this, because this create answer form is agnostic to what question I need to add it to. So we can easily fix this by overriding on submit. So if you see here, because this is a form, we have few things we can override, and we're going to override on submit, and this is going to basically change the data just before we submit the form. So and when we do this, we're going to add the question ID for this page. So the on submit takes a function, and just for your information, if you were wondering where is the documentation for this, you can go back to the Amplify UI. We go back to the create answer form, and in configure, it sort of tells you how to do this on success, on submit, and overrides. So it will open a tab with the correct place. So I'm going to configure on submit, and this is how I can do it. So let me go back to the code. Let me open the app first and then go back to the code. So this will take a function that has fields, and we're going to say const updated fields is copy of the fields, and inside updated fields, question ID equal the question that is in the state dot ID. All right, let's test this if it works. Forgot to return updated fields, and yes, now submit. If I refresh, I can see it. Correct. So yes, I forgot to return the updated fields. However, when I answer, I don't want to refresh the page. I want this to automatically close and the answers to be updated. So what we can do is on success. So if the form succeeded, we can say set show answer form to false. And if this value keeps changing from show answer form to set show answer form, we can do a lazy hack to just trigger, or you can create a new state for this part to just query the new answers again. All right, let's compile, refresh and test it again. So what is the answer to life? I told you I don't know. And submit. It closes and it comes here. I told you I don't know. And you notice that sometimes the data is not there immediately, but if you refresh, it comes there. You can improve the code here in the use effect by inside first the sort part here that we're querying. Let's add a sort. So because I want to see the top questions in the beginning. So to add a sort, we can provide an object like this and say created at sort direction from AWS Amplify descending. So sort direction is important for AWS Amplify. And I can see that my latest answer now is on the top. We can also make this date more friendlier. So since we're in the use effect here, this is where we're getting the answers from the backend. Before we do this, let's sort of make them nicer. If there were answers from backend, we can say const formatted answers equal answers from backend dot map ans. So we can say const date if this exists, new date. Otherwise, just use existing date for now because it's a new item. And we're going to be saying before this, let's create an object. A copy of the object from answer. So updated object created at will be date to local date string. Also, if the name was not there, so for example it was not filled because it's an optional, we can check if it exists. Otherwise we can use the same if it exists. Otherwise we'll just say anonymous. So this is a map, return updated object, and and then we can move this set inside this condition and say set answer formatted answers. So if I refresh, I can see the dates better. If I answer with sample answer with no author and I just submit, and it will probably say it should say anonymous. Didn't say anonymous. Oh, I didn't use name, it was author, my mistake. Yeah, correct. Last test. Oh no. Last test. Okay. For some reason I'm seeing the answers in the bottom instead of the top. So I was noticing a small bug here that if I answer a question, so for example test 2, that it was not showing in the top, it was only showing in the end, even though we were actually sorting it out. And I was debugging here and I found out that probably the issue is when we are on success, and this small hack that we triggered the use effect, this probably shouldn't be a correct hack. It was a lazy hack from my side, but let me do this fix. So I'm going to move this function outside the use effect, and now this use effect, just if the question changes, we're going to query the answer. And on success of create answer form, we're gonna do also a set timeout of, for example, a second, and then we're gonna go query answers, pass it in the question.id. So here we're gonna wait 1 second. This is an async await function as well. So now if I test again, I should see it on the top immediately. So this looks okay. Let me just do one last couple CSS touches here. So this width looks better. I also updated this actually in here, set show answer form to be the opposite, so I can toggle it like this. Maybe I need to add some margin bottom here. So this is us done. Let's go back to the main page. Let's ask a new question. I'll submit. We didn't implement this, but you can go back to the form and do on success to reroute using use location. And we can see the question here, is this a good app? Maybe you can also implement sorting on this list as well in your form, in your Amplify, by doing if you remember in the sorting here, when you create the question, you could actually create sorting, and then you can pull this again. We can implement it locally, but let me answer a question. The answer will come here as anonymous. So I think we're done here in terms of code. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna commit this and push this to my GitHub repository. Okay, now I'm done pushing this repository, this app to my GitHub repository in a public one, and I'm gonna go to Amplify. So we're done with the studio. We can actually go back. We can close this, but we can go back to the AWS console. And if you go back to the question and answer app itself, we don't need the studio anymore. But what we can do now is connect the web app like this to host it. So I'm going to connect the branch, and I need to authorize it. So I'm selecting the Amplify question answer repository that I just created with the main branch. And then we're gonna go select next. So we're gonna do some settings. This is the app name. Let's keep it as it is. Staging is fine for now. We can create a new role if you don't have one. So let's create a new role. Permission, tags, review. So you're basically creating a role for AWS Amplify to create the resources on your behalf. I already actually had a role, so I had to add a number. Now I can go back to AWS Amplify and select the roles I created. I created one now, but I already had an existing one, so you can use the previous one. In here you can see the build settings. What we have is npm run build sounds correct, and we can immediately just move on to review. So I'm going to save and deploy, and then it will pick up the app from my GitHub and run the build. As we can see, it's provisioning, and then it's going to build and deploy. While it's doing that, I need to go to rewrites and redirects, and I'm going to add a rewrite here. And the reason I have to add one here is because this is a React router app, and it needs to know how to redirect the URLs here, because these don't exist as actual pages, so you're gonna get access denied. So if you go to the link here that I just opened, and it goes to redirects for single page web apps, you can just copy this and paste it here, and then the target will be index.html, and it'll be 200. I'm gonna save. So I'm gonna wait for this to finish, and then we can see the app running. Alright, the app build has completed and deployed, so we can open it in a new tab, and we will have our custom domain here. Actually, if you want to customize the domain, you can go back to domain management and you can add a domain here. I'm not going to do this here, but we have the same data that we have before because we use the same environment, and you can share the app and ask questions now. This is all for the tutorial. I hope you learned something. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments.